The old reels flicker, and a familiar laugh echoes, the same laugh that has lived for nearly a century. But behind that sound lies a secret so disturbing that even Disney Ass Archives tried to erase it. In the early 1900s, Indiana was home to one of the darkest institutions in American history, the Indiana State Children, as home for the incurable. It was built to house children who could not be fixed. Some were born with deformities, others with mental disorders that science at the time barely understood. Locals called it the Hall of Misfits. The place was cold, always smelling of rust, bleach, and something worse: fear. The windows were sealed with metal bars, and the rooms were filled with the echoes of moans and muffled cries. Among the children was one boy who was different. No one knew his name. His file only said, "Patient 136, male, age 8, uncontrollable laughter." He laughed day and night, not out of joy but pain. His laughter was sharp, almost animal, breaking through the silence of the halls. His jaw was deformed, locked halfway open so his mouth never fully closed. Nurses began calling him Goof. They strapped him to an iron bed because his body convulsed whenever he laughed. His lips cracked, his teeth bled. And still, the laughter continued, high, broken, unstoppable. Visitors who came to the asylum wrote in their journals that they could hear the sound even from the garden outside. Some claimed it echoed through the night, bouncing off the walls long after lights were out. A janitor once told a doctor, "It's like the building breathes with him. When he laughs, the walls move." One winter night, the laughter stopped. When nurses entered his room, they found him still, eyes wide open, lips twisted upward as if frozen mid-laugh. He was 13 years old. The doctors ordered his body removed immediately. But when they opened his file to record the death, the paperwork was gone. Only his photograph remained, black and white, blurred, showing a boy with sagging ears made from bandages and a grin too wide for a child. No one spoke of him again. But someone did not forget. 20 years later, during the early days of Walt Disney Animation, a group of illustrators was shown a strange folder in a private meeting. It contained photos of asylum patients collected for reference. Among them was the face of patient 136. The men were told to study the boy's expressions, his grin, his teeth, his eyes. "He's perfect for what we're creating," their supervisor said. "Something funny, something timeless." And so they began to trace, frame by frame, line by line, the long face, the droopy eyes, the wide, cracked smile. By the time they finished, a new character was born, a clumsy, cheerful dog who laughed like no one else. They named him Goofy. But when the sound department began designing his voice, something strange happened. The first recordings were cheerful, exaggerated, cartoonish, until one technician decided to try something darker. He played a wax cylinder from the archives, an old recording labeled only as Asylum Test 1903. The reel crackled. Then a laugh. High, broken, terrifying. Everyone in the room went silent. The sound engineer whispered, "That's it. That's the laugh." They layered it, stretched it, and used it as a guide for Goofy's final voice. Each time the actor mimicked the sound, the technician pressed the wax needle deeper, as if forcing the memory of that child into the record. In 1932, Goofy made his first public appearance. Families loved him. They laughed. But some parents froze when they heard his voice. One woman fainted in the theater. Her husband said later, "My son was in that asylum. I know that laugh." And from that moment, every time Goofy's cartoon laugh echoed through living rooms, it carried something no one could erase: the voice of a boy who died laughing in pain. Every rerun, every re-release, every recording still carries that same echo, because that laugh was never created. It was taken. By 1935, Goofy had become a household name. Kids adored him. His laugh, that strange yuk-yuk, filled theaters and living rooms across America. No one questioned where it came from, but inside the animation studio, a few of the old sound technicians whispered. They said the first recordings didn't come from the actor. They came from something much older. The sound archive was stored deep beneath the studio, a vault of wax cylinders, test reels, and early sound experiments. The label on one box simply read, Indiana Reference Material, 1903. For years, no one dared open it. Then in 1951, a young archivist named Harold Klein was assigned to catalog the contents of that vault. He worked nights, sorting through dusty film cans and faded photographs. One evening, he came across that same box. Inside were 4 wax cylinders and several photographs. The images were disturbing. Black and white pictures of children strapped to iron beds, faces blurred, eyes dark. In one, a boy's mouth was forced open with cloth and bandages. His teeth were cracked. His lips were bleeding, but he was smiling. Harold almost dropped the photo. On the back, someone had written in faded ink, Goof. Curious, he placed the first wax cylinder on the playback machine. At first, there was static, then faint breathing, then a laugh. It wasn't human. It was high, sharp, and wet, like someone gasping through a smile. It looped over and over, slowly becoming distorted as the recording continued. By the end, it turned into what sounded like choking, and then silence. Harold didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he reported the finding to his supervisor. A week later, his employment was quietly terminated. The same day, the wax cylinders vanished from the vault. Years passed. The story faded. But strange things began happening during Goofy's voice sessions. In 1962, the voice actor Pinto Colvig reportedly told a friend, Sometimes when I record the laugh, I hear another one underneath. It's faint, but it's there, like someone laughing with me, or at me. The studio dismissed it as paranoia, yet the engineers noticed too. The sound meters would spike randomly during recordings, even in silence. Once, while reviewing playback, an intern swore she heard a whisper between takes, Stop laughing. Disney's management ordered a cleanup of the old archives in 1973. Thousands of documents were destroyed, and the Indiana reference box was officially lost. But it wasn't. In 1987, a journalist named Lorraine Miller began investigating a rumor about the asylum after an anonymous letter was mailed to her office. The letter contained only one line, Find the boy behind the laugh. Lorraine traveled to Indiana. The old state children's home had been abandoned since the 1940s, but the structure still stood, covered in ivy and silence. Inside, she found medical files scattered on the floor, most unreadable, water-damaged. Then she found it. A drawer labeled Section 136. The folder inside was empty except for one brittle photograph, the same image Harold had described decades earlier. The boy with the bandaged ears, the bleeding smile. But this time there was something else. At the bottom of the photograph, faintly scratched in pencil, were the words, He never stopped. Lorraine sent copies of her findings to several film historians. None replied. Months later, she went missing. Her car was found near the ruins of the asylum. The tape recorder on her passenger seat contained 6 minutes of audio. Most of it was static, but halfway through a faint laugh could be heard. High, cracked, familiar. When the tape was analyzed, the sound pattern matched perfectly with Goofy's laugh from 1932. No one could explain it. Over the years, people have reported hearing the same laugh in strange places. Amusement parks after closing hours, empty cinemas, even through old VHS tapes left running. Some say the pitch distorts slightly, like the voice is struggling to breathe. Animators who worked on Goofy-esque later films claimed they sometimes saw shapes appear in early test frames. Silhouettes that didn't belong, reflections of a thin boy in hospital clothes, standing just behind the character. By 2000, Disney's restoration team digitally cleaned and remastered many of the early shorts. But during the remastering of Mickey-esque Revue, Goofy-esque Debut, the system crashed repeatedly whenever they processed his laughter. The audio files became corrupted, replaced with long stretches of static followed by bursts of that same broken laugh. The technician on duty described what he heard that night. It was like the file was breathing. When they played it back again, the waveform on the screen resembled a heartbeat. steady, rhythmic, pulsing in time with the laughter. That version was never released. Some claim if you slow down Goofy's original laugh by 800%, you can still hear something beneath it. A faint voice whispering, almost pleading. One audio engineer said he isolated the background and heard words hidden in the distortion. 4 of them. Please make it stop. The boy from the asylum was never identified. His records were erased. His voice, however, remains everywhere, broadcast on television, theme parks, toys, cartoons. His laugh is still the same, unchanged in nearly a century. And perhaps that's why it feels so human. Every time Goofy laughs, a piece of that old sound escapes again, a reminder of a child who couldn't stop laughing, even as it killed him. So the next time you hear it, that goofy, cheerful laugh, listen closely. If it sounds a little too real, a little too painful, you might be hearing what's left of him, the boy who never stopped.